online for authors. I'm chatting with Rodney Miles, author of The Book Dude's Guide to Self-Publishing. He's here to chat today about indie marketing. Welcome, Rodney.
Thanks so much. I'm very excited to meet you.
I'm super excited to have you here. Lots of things I'm sure to talk about. But before we really jump into that, tell me a little bit about yourself. Give me a bio as to why you're the one who could write a book called The Book Dude's Guide to Self-Publishing, and then maybe just a quick overview of what people would find in that book that you've written.
Sure. My name is Rodney Miles. My full name is Rodney Miles Tabor. I reserved my full name for one day doing, my own titles, and it's proved to be very useful. But I'm 55, and I started life over at 40. Had always loved books as a little kid. I talk about it in my book. I actually remember sending a dollar bill and some coinage in an envelope from Staten Island over to Manhattan to buy Little Mad magazine books, and that was the start of my book collection. And my mother was an avid reader, which I talk about as well. But I grew up in a way that you just knew there weren't any artists in the family at the time professionally. So, of course, you had to go into business or something. You couldn't be a writer or an actor.
Exactly.
What's that, right? So I went one way, and then at 40, I was in real estate. The bubble burst in Florida. We lost everything. And it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to us. We restarted, and it was an opportunity to restart in books. And I mean that books. I love not just reading and writing, but the production and collecting them, and real bibliophile, I guess. So that's 15 years. Started writing as ghostwriting at a penny a word. And then learned self-publishing very quickly. I realized when I wrote my book about writing books that when I got involved, the ebook was only 5 years old, and Amazon was a relatively new phenomenon, and it's been fabulous. I absolutely love what I do. It's been an ample time to kind of embrace and test and get involved in all aspects of the business, and I love all aspects of it. In fact, we're going to a used bookstore on Friday.
Yeah. So it's crazy. We not the same, but we have some similar paths in that. Like, I've loved books since I was a child. I'm trying to think, right around 1999, right before Y2K, when everyone was sure that the computers were all going to crash and die, I started freelancing and writing ebooks and things for small companies and working on their websites, because they were putting up these, websites were new, and all companies were supposed to have one. And the things that people were putting up on them were horrible. They weren't well written. And I realized, hey, this is something that as a stay-at-home mom, which is what I wanted to do, that I would also be able to do this, because I could do it around my children's schedule, and I could do, so I started doing that. I did it for 20 years. And it wasn't until 22 that I began writing my own books. And so, yeah, it's so kind of a similar pattern in that, you start one place and you just kind of weave around in there and you see what's out there. So let's dive into marketing. Marketing is something that, when I talk with authors, I find that you say marketing and their eyes glaze over, and they don't believe they can do it, or they get this horrible fear and don't believe they can do it, right? Like, wait, I just want to write. And if you're going to be an indie author, just writing isn't really going to cut it if you plan on actually selling anything. So let's talk about that. For instance, what would you think would be what's the number one thing an indie author should first do?
Write a series.
Okay.
I mean that.
Yeah.
There are authors, and I don't want to exclude half the audience, right off the bat. Or, it would be similar to write a number of books on a particular, in the same genre.
Okay.
Now, because of the marketing leverage and the opportunities, there's a lot of built-in advantages when you have a backlist.
Yes.
And it's funny, it's probably, I've been doing this 15 years, probably 14 years ago. I figured out this little formula. L times L equals V. List times list equals viability. And one list is your backlist, and the other list is your email list specifically. And then viability is making enough money to be an author full time.
Right.
So, yeah, and I guess I'm serious. So when I say a series, there are authors. I'm a great student of a lot of these authors who have shared what they've learned, and Wayne Stinnett comes to mind, and he basically says, you have a 7-book series, certainly a 10-book series, you're kind of set. And if you break that into why that is, your first book can be free or 99 cents. People find you, test you.
Right.
Second book is $2.99. Third book, and there's this structured pricing to where your 6th and 7th books are $5.99, $9.99, and it's an automatic. It's a built-in machine. It's a little funnel. It's a way for people to test. Actually, literally a funnel. If out of 100 people who may read that free or cheap first book, a percentage will carry through. And when you build up your email list, you'll get to a point where whenever you come out with a new book, there are 10,000 people just waiting to buy it.
Waiting to buy it. Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the email list. How does one go about? I mean, when my first book came out in 22, I knew nothing. I knew nothing about marketing at all. Zero. I had a book. I sat in front of Amazon and waited for it to sell and was very disappointed, and then had to figure out what to do from that point. So I worked backward. And when I started a newsletter, and I had, 3 people on it, my mother, my daughter, and then I've started building it. But I'm just curious, how would you recommend that people begin building a list?
I would, my personal view is you have to find out what is right for you. There are marketers who will get you to sign up with an incentive and then hammer you. I've signed up for one marketing outfit, 1-2 emails a day, just boom, boom, boom. They don't care. They don't care. They're looking at the metrics,
right?
The pop-ups, some of the things that I find annoying generally have proven to be effective as far as the results that they apparently get you. So, but nonetheless, if you find that annoying, unless you change your mind about it, it's not sustainable. It's got to be something, an approach. And you're actually, we say email list, which is kind of the cold, mechanical way of saying your reader community,
right?
And that's inspiring and encouraging in today's world, because I think community is the new zeitgeist. Community is the new thing, and like all surges or things that I've watched happen in this and in even other lives and other businesses, there's often a surge, or sometimes I call it a swarm, or something gets hot and everybody jumps on, and after a while it'll weed out to where the ones who are really serious, as soon as some resistance is encountered or some things, challenges are encountered, a lot of people will jump ship, and you're left with the people who really mean it, so there's that exact thing's going on today, I believe, with community. School is just huge. It's backed by a lot of heavy hitter marketing people, and I looked it all over and found community that I'll probably start up and start using. I think it's Mighty Networks, because it's a much more personal experience, and the community is designed, baked into that community are devices to make it engaging and to make sure that people have wins and results right away. So a lot of good things.
Yeah, I think when you consider an email list as more like your book community, your reader community, then what you put in those emails that you send out when you create those newsletters, it changes. Because if you're building a community versus trying to sell your book, and it's not that you're not trying to sell your book, because you are, but you're wanting to sell your book to your community. I've found that in mine, I do 2 a month.
Hmm.
And so I try not to bombard people. Every now and then I'll have a special something I want people to know, and I'll send it out, and I'll even let them know, hey, sorry to bother you again, kind of thing. Like, I know this isn't normal. But one of mine is it's book reviews. So I've been reading, I read. And so I put out book reviews, and my reading community loves that, because I'm not just saying it's all about me. I'm saying, hey, look at these great books I've read. Would any of these suit you? Right. And so that's one thing. And then my other one is news about me and my books. And so they get both. And I've found that for me, when I get someone on my newsletter who has signed up, if they've done so in person at an event where they've seen me, very rarely do they fall off. If I get it some other way, like, a marketing, someone will come along and they'll have this idea, and, oh, I'll get 600 new subscribers. And within the first month, 580 of them fall away because they were just there for the free thing. And if they didn't win the free thing, they really weren't interested. And so I don't know, for me, I have found that an in-person way of collecting emails is the easiest and best way. It's a little slow. You don't get them in big groups, but they also don't fall away in big groups.
Right. And that seems to be the truth with other authors as well, that there's I think some authors don't want to hear it. They have this idea, first time authors or people who are maybe a little naive about it. It's a business. There is a business side. It's okay if you don't like that. It's okay if you hate that. You just need to provide for it. Either figure out how you can do it or figure out some way that it gets done for you. But you have to approach it as a business. And when your book is live on Amazon, I always compare it to this hot sauce story where I met a guy who came up with his own hot sauce, and he got it in Publix, which you probably know is the major grocery chain. And you would think he's done, but he's just getting started. And that's kind of when you get published. It's a whole nother stage of your author life.
Right.
So those live in-person appearances seem to be one of the foremost. I have a lot of authors that I've worked with that would say the same thing, not just for, and then a follow-up marketing machine in place to where they're followed up with, and you get reviews that way as well.
Right. So I love doing in-person. I love going to book clubs. You talk with 20 to 30 women who all are excited about your book. And they purchase it because it's, they want you to sign it. While you're there, I've got my backlist with me always. So if we're talking about one book, I've got all my others. So I sell other books, right? I tell everyone, what's the one thing you can do for me? I want you to go in today and give me a review. And not everyone does, but you get a couple, you see a little bounce there as you go into those. And anyone who hasn't signed up for my newsletter, I ask them, would you like to? I would love to have you on. And like I said, of those people who sign up in those events, libraries, I love going to a library and a meet the author kind of event. Those people tend to stick around. It's like once they've heard you, they've met you, you're now their friend.
Yeah.
And people like to know authors. I don't understand why, but they do. They love knowing an author.
Yeah, it's a romantic thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be an author.
It's like, oh, you're an author. And it's like, yeah, I am an author.
but there's a lot of truth in it. You're someone who's shared ideas and been courageous enough to share your soul. Underpinning all this is, when I was a kid, there was a book called Megatrends by John Nesbitt. And he talked about high tech, high touch was a concept, was a mega trend. And this is back when TV shopping channels were started. This is before the internet. This is
right.
And everybody was, our shopping mall's going to close. You don't have to go anymore. And Nesbitt pointed out, no, because there seems to be this thing where the more technology we have, the more we need to balance it with touch, with a human element. And that's exactly what we're talking about. That gets missed sometimes.
Exactly. So what other great marketing ideas do you have? We've talked about, like have a series or a backlist. So if you're not a series writer, then just make sure, because I know it is true. When I had one book, then what?
Yeah, one book is tough. One
One
book
book
can
is
be tough.
And I now have 5 books. And so 5 books is a whole lot better. I'm noticing I can do a lot more with my 5 books. Someone's read one, I have 4 others, I can sell them. Whereas if they've read the one, what else do you do? Right.
Yep.
So that's a good idea. I definitely believe in collecting emails. Like you should, that because they're yours. No matter what else goes on in the world, whether social media would close, whether the platform is gone, whatever happens, you still have your email list. So your community.
Yeah,
what else do you recommend?
I recommend doing your own publicity.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about podcasts like we're doing, but also when you get into the TV and bloggers and reviews, and I say do your own because the professional publicity can be prohibitively expensive, especially when you're talking about, selling your $2.99 ebook.
Exactly. Right. I also think now publicists, they're good. It's not that, but I love my books more than a publicist will.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I have a way of looking at them differently, and I want to see them succeed more. And so I just feel like what I can do, and sometimes I've hired people to help to do pieces and parts that I'm not able to do at the time, but generally I have my fingers in it because I just feel like it's mine.
Yes, and you'll often be disappointed by help. Frankly, there's even if you do it temporarily. There was a real estate course I did when I was younger, and Carlton Sheets, and he said, if you're going to rent properties, do it yourself, like initially, because even if you have an eye to not doing that, even if you hate it, and this is good advice for authors, you get in the trenches and you see what it takes.
Right. You know what it is they're doing.
Right.
You have a clue as to what it is you're paying for and what you expect the outcomes to be.
Yep. Right. And in Freakonomics, they talk about 8 real estate agents always make more on their own sales because they're willing to wait for a better offer. So it translates because like you say, you care more about your book, your book, you speak with, and that's a lot of these marketing basics carry over from your production. I always tell people, like with cover design in your book, you want to love them both. And I use the word love because if you love, you're excited about your book and you're passionate about it, you love your cover, it makes it very easy to share,
Exactly. I do a little marketing with some local authors. And the first thing that I told them was, I said, there's the number one thing that you need for marketing. And they're all like, they're all ready to take notes. And I said, you have to be able to say, hi, my name is Terry Ann Brown. I wrote Daughters of Green Mountain Gap. It's a great book. You should read it. And if you can't say that, there's a problem. Either you've not written a great book, therefore get it off the market and fix it, or you need to come to recognize that you are a good author and that it's a great book and that people should read it. Because if you can't say it, no one else is going to say it for you.
That's right.
So,
you're reigniting my love for my book.
Yeah.
Because I really feel it's called The Modern Author. It's the first in this Book Dude series. And the whole idea is you need to be a modern author. You need to understand what publishing deal means, what it meant 20 years ago, what it means now.
Exactly.
A lot of this has changed, and it just gets you on the field and prepared for what you're doing. So
and I think
I do feel that way.
I actually had an author reach out to me after giving this, where I said that, and they said, doesn't that just sound, I don't know, like conceited? And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know. Let's look at it in terms of a plumber. I said, if a plumber comes to your house, you've got a stopped up toilet and you can't use your toilet. And the plumber comes in and says, I am the best plumber in the area and I can fix your toilet. Do you think he's conceited, or are you just glad you got the best plumber? You know? And they were kind of like, well, and I said, it's the same thing. You're telling people I've got a good book and you should read it. Like, you're not being conceited. You're letting them know, hey, I have a product I think you would like.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's not conceited for a plumber to say he's a good plumber, then it isn't conceited for an author to say they're a good author.
Right.
Right.
Right. Oh yeah. And then you get into the energy of it and the law of assumption and
Right. And we have, you know, the whole imposter syndrome going on where, you know, so many authors are like, well, I mean, I sort of am an author. And it's like, well, did you write a book or not? Because if you did, you're an author.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yep.
Yeah. So,
yep.
When you talk about publicity, so you've said, you know, like podcasts, what other ways can indie authors who often don't have a ton of excess cash sitting over in the corner somewhere, right? What else can they do? Podcasting to me is a good way. A lot of podcasts are free or cheap. And so it's a good way to reach audiences that you might not reach otherwise. What other ways can we get our name out there, get our books out there?
Okay. It's a good question. It's a very practical question. And it's one thing to say publicity or podcasts or radio or TV, but you need to be prepared for it. And there's just a couple basic assets you want to create. You want to have your elevator pitch, for example, and you want to have that pride. You want to have that sense about your own book and what it can do for somebody, whether that's entertainment or solving a problem. But specifically, I would create what's called a media sheet.
Right.
I would create what's called a book one sheet, media one sheet. It's just a single page with everything a host would need, basically. A headshot, bit about your book, a bio, some questions that you're prepared to answer. You can Google this and create your own. And when you've got that, it's a media asset that will serve you really well. If you have a website, create a media page that makes it very handy for, you can direct people there. Some hosts will use that. Some hosts won't. They prefer individual files in an email or, and keep things brief and professional. And if a host says, please send me your headshot, like you asked me, just send him the headshot. So you want to be prepared for it. Another way to be prepared, I'm talking about podcasts, radio appearances, getting your book out there because sometimes publicity isn't an interview, it's getting a review copy to somebody.
Exactly. Right.
You can make these lists yourself. You can approach them. There's even some protocols to be aware of. Let's say you talk to a show host named Steve, and he's got a big enough show that he's got a bit of a staff and so on. If you're sending Steve a book, write on the envelope, it highlighted as requested by Steve, because he may be getting books from other unsolicited books.
And that might end up in a pile somewhere that he never receives, right? Okay.
Yeah. Or in his VA's bathroom.
Right, exactly. Absolutely.
All this is learnable. And one of the best ways is to start small. I should write a book called Think Small. When you start doing, but here's the thing, over and over, little library appearances, little local bookstore, these all prove to be really effective.
Yeah.
And it's not just, hey, I got in front of 10 people or I added to you're also developing your chops. Yeah. You're getting out in front of people. You're realizing when you're doing a book signing, a lot of people just out of the blue will meander over and say, what's your book about? And you might have written a 3-paragraph marketing copy for your Amazon page, but now you need that 1-sentence summation.
Exactly. Right? And that's something I've noticed a lot of authors cannot do. As a podcast host, my first question for most authors is, give me your elevator pitch for your book. What are we going to find when we open? Some authors have it down. They can give you a quick little, sentence or two blurb that makes you want to then go in and read it. And other authors look at me like it's and they They don't have it. They don't know how to bring that down. So that idea of an elevator pitch, I think, is a marvelous idea. And I actually work with someone, his name is Frank Winters, and he's a public speaker. And he tells authors that they should have more than one elevator pitch. They should have the 15-second, the 30-second, the 45-second, the 1 minute, the 2 minute, depending on what situation you're in. Right? So like how much information does this person want? Are you literally in an elevator with them going from floor 1 to floor 3? Well, then you need your 15-second blurb. Are you sitting down for coffee and they've asked? You might have 2 minutes. Right? So you have to kind of have this variation of what is my book about, so that you can then present it based on the situation you find yourself in.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Maybe 2 other little thoughts on that.
Yeah.
It comes from writing good blurbs. A lot of authors think, well, that's a synopsis of my book, and that's not what you want to put there. You want, if it's nonfiction, for example, you want to touch on their pain, suggest the book solves that, give a few bullet points, and then some sort of subtle call to action. If you just summarize the book, that's not terribly helpful, because the person. So in other words, if you're developing a quick 1-2 sentence elevator pitch, there's 2 little tricks. One would be to simply, rather than summarize, state what the book is supposed to solve or what it does. It takes you to a different world, or whatever the essence of it might be. Another little trick is, apparently in Hollywood, there's this little trick when pitching a movie, you just cross 2 movies. So like, tell me what the book's about, very quickly.
Right. It's a combination of this and this.
Yes, it's E.T. meets Cocoon, or whatever.
Right.
Some reason when you cross 2 things, it triggers extrapolation in the mind of the listener. And I learned that from Stephen R. Donaldson. He had 2 characters floating around, and he said he really didn't see a book, but then when he had them meet, the whole world opened up, and he wrote a series just based on the 2 characters interacting. Right. So there's something magical about when you cross something like that. Well, it may help with your pitch.
And I think too, if you're using books that people tend to know, or authors that people tend to know, and you can say, hey, this is a cross between this and this. Now they've associated you with those authors, and that doesn't hurt you either.
Right. There's a whole package of thought.
Right.
In something that somebody's already familiar with.
Right.
We were watching, I think it was Hot Tub Time Machine 2, and one of the characters says, oh, look, it's the poor man's Macarena.
Right.
But it's this whole package of thought, and the listener goes, oh, well, I
know what to do with that.
I kind of know what that is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I love that.
That's a cool tip.
Yeah.
It's a cool tip.
Absolutely.
Especially, you're nervous, you got a line of people, it's bang.
Yes.
And if you can intrigue them.
Right. And if you have something that makes them go, ooh.
Yeah.
And then often, if you have people that are, especially if you've got like a booth of some kind and people are coming up and you can give the quick one-liners, it'll be enough for them to pick that book up, and now they're going to read your blurb on the back.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point, because I learned in marketing, your ad, believe it or not, the immediate purpose of your ad might not be to sell a book. It might be to get them to click. And then when they get to your book page, you break it down. Their eyes are going to go to the title and the imagery on the cover. So that basic's got to be cool.
Right.
Then if they're in their little microsecond calculation digging it, they might read your subtitle. And now you really need to hammer exact expectations. It's like a little microsecond trail to get them to your blurb. And then the reviews kick in. It's like you could actually almost make it a linear process of micro steps to get to where they are going
to purchase, because the likelihood is they're not going to purchase just because they saw an ad.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
it's going to take
Right.
something a little more. It's going to take them going and looking and starting to dig and make decisions.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. I looked at, so I did something on NetGalley with one of my books, and they tell you what the person saw, like what it was. The person that goes into NetGalley can mark the different things that caught their attention for the book and why it was they chose to download that book.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone who is not a known author, so my name, I tell everyone I'm a very big fish in my very tiny pond here. But once I leave my tiny little area, no one knows who I am, right? So I am not a big fish. Without a name recognition, the thing that captures their attention first was the cover.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that captured their attention was the title.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing that captured their attention was the blurb.
Yeah.
And it was in that order.
Yeah.
If the people, we talk all the time, don't judge a book by its cover, but we do.
Yeah, we call that the basics. And it actually starts when you start into your book project. And what I mean is an author, first-time author might have a full manuscript, and then they get to this point where it's kind of like they're at the edge of a cliff. Like, whoa, what do I do now? The ensuing process, this is what I talk about in my book, The Modern Author, because it explains the there are best practices in the self-publishing process leading up to published that will, if your basics are out, if things haven't been handled as well in that process, no marketing is going to work.
Right.
First, know that. So your marketing starts with your cover and your passion and your story. And when you have those things, I listened to this wonderful podcast long before I was ever doing podcasts or anything years ago. Learned a lot from podcasts through my career. This was, well, I don't want to name it because they made a fundamental mistake. They were also writing a book as part of their first season. And it really drove home when their book came out. The cover looked like YA fiction.
Yeah.
And it was a nonfiction book about writing and publishing. And I thought, wow, what a disastrous mistake. There's like 3 or 4 critical elements in your book cover. And one of them is it's got to fit the genre.
Absolutely.
It's got to fit the genre. They have to look at the cover and go, oh, memoir, or oh.
I know what that is. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Rodney, if someone wanted to reach out to you, ask you more questions, you obviously have a lot of information that you could provide to people. They want to maybe perhaps work with you or get some of your other books. How do they find you?
RodneyMiles.com.
Super easy, guys. It'll be in the show notes. You'll be able to do that. Are you on social media and other places where they can also reach out?
Not really, no.
Not really. Rodney says, I don't do social. Which could be we could have a whole nother talk just about
that's a whole
media
nother
and why you're not there, right? All right. Well, Rodney, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. This has been a wonderful conversation. We got a lot of really good suggestions out of it. And guys, if you do have questions, he's written the book, Book Dude's Guide to Self-Publishing, right? And others. And so definitely take a look at what he has out there. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Rodney. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.